So every content area begins with this document, with a document very similar to this, with your standards, what you are responsible for knowing, like the information that you're responsible for, and then the particular skills or application of that knowledge that you should be able to do. Can you put the cover over here? Sorry, I have a puppy, so.
It's okay.
And so the way that this document works, and the reason that it's important is that all of these standards are the same sort of standards within the competencies. The competencies come from this document. In fact, they're arranged in such a way, they arrange them how they like, and we'll go take a look at it. We'll go back and forth between the documents. So we'll come here to take a look at the preparation manual. And if you'll take a look at this, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. So you'll see that domain 1 of the exam that Pearson gives is understanding individuals with disabilities and evaluating their needs. And it makes up approximately 13% of the exam. And then it shows you over here the standards that are assessed. These are the standards from the document we were just viewing. So within domain 1, the standards that are assessed are 4 and 5. And so just from a sort of like a strategic standpoint, it being, or those standards being sort of lower on the test percentage, I would spend less time sort of really studying that and more time where the percentage is larger, right? So then you go to domain 2, and this is promoting student learning and development. This one is worth 33% because it sort of like encapsulates so much. And it is over standards 6 through 10 of the document that we just looked at. 33% comes from one domain, and then another 33, making 66%. So it behooves you to super duper know these 2 domains and this grouping of standards, right? To look over both documents, because what the state does is they send the standards document to Pearson whenever they come up with a new content area, much like they just did with the science of teaching reading. I watched it happen sort of like live and in action. I watched the standards document come, be revised and be argued and revised until it was solidified as a document that they then send off to Pearson. And, they regrouped it how they like, and it became the exam. So at the end, you also have 20% with foundations, professional roles, and responsibilities. So 13% is you understanding individuals with disabilities and evaluating their needs. So that means that sort of a basic or summarized type notion of different disabilities that students might encounter. So you would have like emotion, behavioral disorder, or you have someone that has like a learning disorder with specific reading comprehension, or you have someone who's dyslexic. There's like within special ed, it is such a large umbrella because it isn't just those that need support in an obvious way. And so just knowing those general terms, knowing also that you are meant to support gifted students as well. Gifted students are under special education umbrella because they literally learn differently, and many things that are easy and natural for just like general ed population, a gifted student will have difficulties with and need supports and extra things at times. And so understanding all of the students with individuals, all of the disabilities that you might come into contact with. And a really good document for that is in the folder, and it is the Mometrix document. It's the yellow document in the folder, and I'll bring it to your attention later. But that one's really good. It's not good for practicing and test questions, but it is good as far as like content stuff and looking up the laws. Like if you want to look up what laws were used, to make it to where homeschooled students also receive special education services, because that is the case. Homeschool students and private school students can receive federal special education support in their classes. It is their right, regardless of if they're not enrolled. So those types of things will be in there, but the questions that they give in that document are not really like, they're just knowledge based questions, and not really the type that special ed gives you. So the promoting student learning and development, that's worth 33% because it's so important. It is your knowledge and promotion of student learning via differentiating of instruction, via your understanding of the way in which students learn, the way students learn differently with different disabilities, and utilizing different strategies, different supports, manipulatives, in order to get them to achieve academic learning success. But that's not just student learning, it's student learning and their development. So for a special education teacher, you guys are like little angels on the campus, because you have a little bit more of a task than the normal teacher. So you are responsible with your special ed students, especially those that work in high school, but all throughout, just supporting the students' development academically, but socially, emotionally, their affective learning, their social emotional learning. I said that already, their linguistic support. And so it's like the overall development, and depending on the severity of the disability, you have to implement different curriculums. You won't have to do an effective curriculum or social emotional learning for all of your special ed kids, but you will have some in which you will need that in order to help support their development as a human, who will one day exit the special ed program from public school and theoretically be on their own. And so we need for them to be like able to be advocates for themselves, right? And to stand up for themselves, go after their interests, know how to use their interests, and know how to depending on the severity of their disability. I mean, it could be something as basic as teaching them how to wash clothes, something like that for leaving and later on, and the transitioning till after, post-secondary life. Excuse me. Another really, and so that's why that's worth so much, just because it has so much to do with like, you have to know what's normal for the way that students learn, like when they're not disabled. And then you also have to know how to help them like with a disability and in their specific age groups, and take all that into consideration. Domain 3 is you're promoting student achievement. So again, that's student learning and development, but in particular in English language arts and reading, ELAR, and mathematics. Really important. It's so important that our students, our special ed students, and our that they have strong math and reading skills, as much as possible, that we hit that, because their ability to read and understand and do some of the more basic math things are going to be fundamental to their success later on.
Yep.
So really getting them as much support as possible. And especially if they have been diagnosed with a particular disability that affects their performance in either one of those areas, of course we would follow along with what's in the IEP. But then there are just general practices, like just general best practices for teaching that you can do to help promote your special ed students' achievement in both English language arts and reading and math. And one of those things is pre-teaching academic vocabulary. Anytime you do small group instruction or you're trying to go over a lesson, pre-teaching or reteaching academic vocabulary. And if you have to reteach, what the definition to division is and actually use, blocks to show them what it's like. Here are 4 blocks. Now I want for you to divide the 4 blocks into 2 by 2 and to show them. And then, so it's having them see it, but especially with academic specific, content specific vocabulary words, it's really important that the students have understanding of that. And like for reading, defining is very, very important. So like, let's say that you are helping in your ELAR teacher, you're a 7th grade, Mr. is a co-teacher for a 7th grade ELAR teacher, Miss ssauceda, and she is doing expository text. And you have a group of students that have, learning disabilities, some of them specifically in reading. And so I do my direct instruction of 5 words. But you've already read it and you see that there are 4 more words that need to be covered in order to not interrupt comprehension. Now, if Miss ssauceda were any type of ELA teacher worth her salt, she would have known her special ed students, and I would have. but it's your job to be the support if she doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
because you know your students better, to know like, okay, Miss ssauceda identified, like maybe she went over the 4 in the textbook, but I know my kids are going to need like at least 4 more words. So you know what, before we read it together, we're going to go over these. That way, when we read it together, there's no holes in comprehension, or there are less holes in comprehension. And that's just you understanding what your students need and then giving them the support beforehand, painting the picture, illustrating what the words are. That way, when you read it in the text, it's not so jarring. Because when students are reading at an instructional level, typically they won't know, like in 100-word text, they won't know like maybe 1 or 2, pushing it 3 words, right? But like pushing it 3 words for instructional. And that's your sweet spot, where you don't want for them to not know so much that they don't understand the whole shebang. If they get past that and they're into 4, 5, 6 words, that's so you get into frustration. That's the frustration level of reading. And we don't want kids there. And we kind of don't want them to always read at the independent level either, because we want them to be learning and picking up new vocabulary. So instructional is where we want them. And for our special ed kids, that might mean more pre-instruction of vocabulary that's going to come into text. And so that would be a strategy you could use to promote ELAR, success. And there are also ones with math. And so we'll go over some of those best practices with things. And there's also a little bit of overlap with, special ed and ELL students. You might have students that require both. You might come into contact with a teacher that says, you know what, I have a student and I think they might be special ed. They're recent immigrant, they're English language learners. And so someone should take into consideration that it takes a while to like get yourself acclimated to the culture and understand nuance of language and culture before. And so it's not always, many times, a limitation in language or limitation in understanding in culture, like nuance of culture, will be mistaken as a deficit and reported to the special education department, when it really is not a special education thing. It's merely a lack of language. It's a linguistic thing. Once they acquire English, they're going to be totally fine. But for instance, and there's one in this manual, a practice question, and it says, I believe it says that the English teacher says that he speaks Spanish. He's been here for a year. He can speak English when he's spoken to. He does speak well when he's spoken to, but he doesn't speak unless he's spoken to. And she thinks he needs like social emotional support, and there might be something, affecting him. But the correct answer was for the special education teacher to consider that sometimes teachers take into account just one perspective, and that might be misunderstood, and so just that not speaking when spoken to, actually coming from another culture, that might be a way that you respect your teachers. It's a very common thing on campuses for especially PE teachers to be reprimanding a group of new PE teachers, to be reprimanding a group of immigrants or English language learners, and not have any of those students look them in the eyes while they're getting a directive or something. But that is a cultural, if you're being told something or reprimanded, to look someone in the eye in some cultures, an adult is seen as defiant and disrespectful, and you should bow your head in shame. And so there are sometimes things that are overlooked and sort of like misunderstood, and that would be the first thing to consider when someone refers you, an English language learner, to the special education department. Okay, we're going to go back to the other document just really quickly so I can show you how to read it, because I do want for you to go through and do a close reading of standards 6 through 10 and 11 and 12. So 6 through 12. And I'll also show you the Mometrix document. So this is the Mometrix document, and it just has a lot of content junk. And so while you're doing a close reading, let's say that you come across a word and you're like, okay, I don't know what that means, like what they mean by that. So you can Google it, or you can look it up in this document, because both places will have a good amount of information for you to fill that gap in knowledge. This is an example of things from domain 1, your understanding of the different disabilities and what needs they might have. Like if someone has language disabilities, if a student is using talk to text or another type something, there's students that use I forget what it's called at the moment, it like left my head, but it is a assistive technology, and it allows us, actually it's assistive communication technology, but it allows them to like speak using pictures. Like they can look at pictures on a screen in a system, because some students don't have the ability of speech, or they have there was one question that was just recently on the exam that one of my students like remembered and was telling me about, that what is it? It's like assistive listening device. I think that's what it's called, ADL. And the question was like, how best might it be used? But we didn't even know what that was. And we just thought, just based on the scenario and what he remembered, that it sounded like it was a hearing aid, right? That the student had, well, we knew that the student had a hearing impairment and was using an ADL, but an ADL is used in order to like streamline. So it's just like a radio device that they wear around their neck, and it links in to their cochlear ear device. So like whatever their hearing aid, and it cuts out like noise cancellation. So like the teacher would be wearing a little speaker, and it would be like the teacher speaking directly into her earpiece, right? And so in a classroom with a student who wears an hearing aid in a loud classroom, like you would need to like use something like that, but we didn't remember that. So that's something that you will, have to know. Another question, and I believe much of that is in here, the legality of it, and that comes out in domain 4. But for instance, going over IEPs, the IEP and everything that a special education teacher deals with concerning a student is confidential and is a legal document. And so the like breaking of confidentiality, it's just like such huge breaches in the law and whatnot. And it's like, it's a sort of like a bigger responsibility, like I said, than the regular gen ed teacher. And so those IEPs, which are just, individual education plans are still very confidential, and they're not things that you would leave with a substitute teacher or a volunteer or a parent volunteer. The only way that it would be allowed for a substitute to receive an IEP would be in a scenario where the principal has assigned like a permanent sub because someone's going on maternity leave, or they're having like this surgery and they're going to be out for 6 weeks. And then typically the district will get a teacher that is certified to be the teacher of record, like an ex-certified sub to be the teacher of record, because of the handling of those documents, because just, you just can't hand those things out. So because everything is very legal, if a parent shows up to an ARD, which is the Admissions Review and Dismissal Committee, right, meeting, if they come to an ARD and they just like, surprise, we're here with our lawyer, what would you do? Do you continue? Do you postpone? Do you call for backup? What do you do? And the correct answer is you always postpone. You cannot meet without legal representation. You can't even meet with the parents and an advocate, like a group advocate, for an advocacy group representative, like any representative there with the parents, because of special ed, because of all the legality, the correct course of action is to reschedule until district assigns their lawyer or whatever personnel they're going to send. I'm just giving you some of the questions that they've most recently seen over what I've heard about. So this is a pretty, it's pretty good. Here you have Erickson's stages of psychosocial development, and this is normal development, normal stages of development, right? And you have Piaget's cognitive development, but these are all like on a normal scale. And then you have these those same theories are on this document as well. You have Piaget's theory of cognitive development. You have Erickson's psychosocial. So this is a really good sort of like document for you to get a lot of the vocabulary that the exam will use. So like talking about diversity, talking about Bloom's taxonomy, simulations and role play. Those are things that are really great to help check for understanding, for when you're doing like social emotional learning and they're learning how to deal with emotions and behaviors and like dealing with particular scenarios. Role playing, discovery learning, all that stuff is good for them. Here are your definitions for assessments. You have your formative assessments, and for special ed, it's really important for you, especially to be giving millions of tiny little formative assessments. Now, formative assessments take place always before and during instruction. So for instance, let's say you, Mr. Herrera, had your group of students and you've had them all year long, and you're trying to see how much they grew in their reading or their fluency, by the end of the year. That's going to be a summative assessment. That's like in summation at the end of all learning. But if you're checking every week on different documents for fluency, if you're checking for understanding in different readings, that's just formative. That's before and during the learning takes place. So if you are in a classroom and they're giving group presentations or they're having group discussions, let's say that you're in an English class and they're going over poetry and they're analyzing it and they're supposed to identify diction and tone in a poem. And you hear the group and you're walking around, and this is with any kids, and they're really off. Like they're just off. They're obviously not choosing diction words, they're just choosing any words. And it's not words that are particularly chosen by the author in order to, get us to feel a certain way and understand his tone and perspective. So then I would know as a teacher walking around hearing this, okay, guys, let's go back and take a look at this poem. and look at what diction is. If I heard too many people, that is a formative, and it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be in the form of a multiple choice or an essay, but it can be, because formatives can be both informal and they can be formal. They can be observations, or they can be whole exams with essays. We use them to form. It's a formative assessments. They help form our instruction. They help form the design and the plan that we have for our students, because it's not just so we could give them, oh, Mr. Dada, you got a B on this exam. It's not just to give you a letter. For us teachers, it's to say, okay, where are you and what didn't you understand? It's not the B, it's the like, what part minus 100 was left unlearned, or what needs support, what areas need better, and whether it's my instruction, whether it's my strategies, my application of different things, might be because there's a lot of things at play, and it's not always the students simply not understanding it. Sometimes it's a bad lesson. I've had to like scrap lessons. I really have, in 16 years. We think we get these lofty ideas in these planning sessions, and then we go in, and then whatever we were trying to do flopped, and then it's like, okay, well, let's go back to something that's a little bit, but it's knowing when to do that, and when it's not the students issue in something else. But so we assess for multiple reasons, but the most important is to see where our students are and what supports they need and where they need them. But also it is like, especially for gen ed teachers, when we are creating the lessons, and luckily and thankfully you guys don't have to do that so much, because you already do so much. It's ridiculous. It's like y'all really have to do a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff. So you should just be able to go in and support the teacher. I mean, depending on what kind of a special education setting that you're in, because there are settings that are very sort of non-restricted, and they're inclusive, where we're in the general ed population with a teacher that you're co-teaching with, or a very restricted area, right, where you have students who need a lot of support and can't leave for whatever reason. And so we super try to limit that as possible, and we try to limit it because not only is it terrible for them in the grow as this person in all of these different domains, academically, cognitively, socially, emotionally, affectively, but it's the law. It is our job to always try to make it to where a student can engage in the least restrictive learning environment. And that's with their peers. That's always going to be with their peers, the least restrictive. So you can't just send them away to a room because there are behavioral issues. It is the job of us to figure out what are the behavioral issues, what goals need to be in place. Do we need to use RTI? Do we need to do a behavior assessment, which is where you look for where the triggers are? And there's actually a question in the oh, it's not in here. Hold on 1 second. Here it is. There's actually a question here. I see. Oh, here. So you have a second grade, and whenever they give you an age group or a grade, if they say a 2-year-old, that's important. They're not just saying, ages and grades for nothing. They're trying to give you a place to put yourself on the spectrum of normal human growth. This is where they should be as a second grader or a 2-year-old, so it might be important. Make sure you pay attention. That's something that to always pay attention if they give you an age group or a grade level, because it might be important. So you have a second grade student with an emotional behavioral disorder, EBD. and is in an inclusion class. One moment, please. Hold on. I'm gonna read that question to yourself and I'll be right back.
This one.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so you have a student and they have emotional behavioral disorder and they're in an inclusion class. Student has violent outbursts that are frequent and seem to increase with time. Which of the following actions is most appropriate for the special education teacher to take to address the student's behavior? Now, whenever you're doing these, always try to put the question in sort of like layman's terms, like what is the goal of the teacher? What is the goal of the special education teacher for her here? What is she trying to do? What's the question asking? What is the goal? We're looking for the best way. Most appropriate means they might have given you more than one appropriate one, but there's one that's more appropriate than the other based on words that they've used here. And so we have a student, and I like to, if you have a highlight feature on the exam, please use it. We have a second grade student who has EBD with everyone else in the class. Violent outbursts, they are frequent and they seem to increase with time. We're looking for an action that is most appropriate. So the best action that the special education teacher can take to address students' behavior. The behavior is what? Frequent outbursts, violent, frequent outbursts that increase with time. So whenever you are getting rid of answer choices, I don't want for you to do it just sort of willy-nilly, like, oh, A is certainly not the answer, B is certainly not the answer. Like, try to eliminate by being able to tell yourself, okay, this is for sure not the answer because, and I can bet myself $5. And that you give each of them sort of equal weight or analysis. So you have A, amending the student's individualized education program to include new behavior goals. B, imposing stringent consequences to deter the onset of undesirable classroom behaviors. Referring the student to the school counselor for redirection during the behavioral occurrence. Conducting a functional behavioral assessment to evaluate the reasons for the behavior.
Okay, ma'am. So I can eliminate, tell me if I'm wrong. I can eliminate B and C.
For sure. Okay. First of all, we do not punish our students for their disability. And we already know that the student, it has an emotional behavioral disorder. So like imposing more stringent consequences, that is going to do nothing to circumvent any issues. And we're certainly not going to be sending him to the counselor, who, by the way, is not even trained to do this. They're not special education teachers. So they wouldn't even be a good outlet. Plus, that's not what they're for. And you would be sending them all the time. You'd be taking them out of the classroom, sending them somewhere else. And so that wouldn't be included with everyone else. And that would do nothing. We need for him to be able to, he or she to be able to function in class without the outbursts. So you're left with A and D. And remember, they gave you maybe two possible appropriate, but one is more than the other based on what they've given us.
Is it D?
It is D. So I'll tell you why it's not A. So we haven't even like implemented new, we already have behavior goals. We need to find out what the root cause is before we go back to changing it. And now if we find out what it is and we're doing all the supports and we go back and then we can change it. We'll take a look at it. So the best thing would be to see what's creating the trigger. And I've seen it happen. I had a student who would get really upset. She might even cry, start being ugly with people. And it all had to do with someone putting their feet on the back of her desk. Like, and she was mildly autistic. And there was like this like silver cage type thing. And hers on the desk that she always sat in, her desk had like a cage that was almost fallen, like it wasn't on there 100%. So I think it jiggled more. Anyway, that was the deal. And it just had to do with paying attention to be able to figure out like what it was that set her off. Like her space was invaded, she was being jiggled about, and then 10 minutes later she has a meltdown, either in with another student or in the groups or in the lesson. And it was a very simple fix. We didn't have to go and redo her whole IEP. First have to like investigate like what's happening here, and see what is leading up to it. I had another student and we didn't do the assessment then, but someone else I'm sure did. But when I got him, I already knew that if we were going to have like a fire drill or a lockdown or any sort of anything, that he was going to be removed from from inclusion, because it was going to be too crazy, too chaotic, and he was going to have a meltdown. And he was very autistic, very bright, very kind, but he's super, like, he didn't like it ever when there was a sub. That was another thing, like no subs, no new friends. And so, but we try to accommodate and reduce triggers whenever we can, not that big of a deal to get them out during a fire drill. Now, if it's a real, we had talked about it, like if it was a real fire, we're like, guys, what if there's a real fire and we don't have, advanced planning and warning? Because the administration plans the fire drills. They have to do so many a year, and lockdowns, and so those things we can handle, but it's the real true emergencies. And so we had a course of action to try, like a little muffin thing for over his ears, and a faster exit to like get to somewhere else, so he wouldn't go with the flow of the class. He would be, there was like in the case of a real emergency, this is what we would do with him, because he really would freak out. So dulling his senses was one of them, and those things were provided there. But those are things that you do have to take into consideration. And obviously, it's not going to be the case for every student, but you are going to have some students that do have special needs, and they're perfectly fine as long as the building doesn't burn down, as long as there's not an active shooter, everything is fine. Like, but that there's different kids, different disabilities, but we try to make those accommodations for all of them. This was the one I was telling you about before. We have Julio, a 6th grader with a learning disability, immigrated with his family to the United States a year ago. Although Julio speaks English well, he never speaks to his classroom teacher unless spoken to. Concerned about this behavior, the classroom teacher suggests to the special education teacher that Julio may need social skills instruction. Which of the following factors is most important for the special education educator to take into account when considering the classroom teacher suggestion? So, he may need it, but he may not, based on his culture. And it might just be the way that his previous, where he immigrated from previously, interacts with educators, which is different from so many different cultures. The level of respect, just the whole interaction with immigrant students is very different. So teachers can misperceive, cultural differences can easily be misinterpreted as problematic behavior. So especially those English language learners, they often, very, very often get misreferred to the special education department, simply because they don't have yet the linguistic ability and that cultural nuance yet. And it comes off to someone who's not looking at the whole picture as problematic. So speaking to the teacher only when spoken to may be a cultural preference and may not be to a lack of social skills. Their social skills may be completely on point, because it's just a learning disability. Okay.
When I looked at like answer C, that was like, wow.
Right. Wow. Low self-esteem can be a sign of abuse and neglect. They didn't say anything about that. A
Yeah,
lot of people choose B, self-confidence with regard to schoolwork, but they're not even talking about schoolwork in this scenario. And that's
yeah,
the way
exactly.
that they try to trick you, because above all, this is a critical reading exam. And so like a bad answer will, if you read it carefully, make itself known, like B, because there nowhere is there any mention of him having difficulties in schoolwork, or his own belief in his ability to
Yeah,
succeed through. Not at all. We're just talking about him not speaking unless he's spoken to. And so C was obviously ridiculous. And
yeah,
then D is never going to be an answer like D, and an answer like B, imposing stringent consequences. It Because this is a theoretical exam, it's not going to be overtly negative. Like D says, general education teachers are often unclear about the special educator's role and make unfounded, another word is like unnecessary or dumb, demands for assistance. So that's never going to be the right like answer.
yeah,
Because it's like overtly negative, and the one about being strict, it's overtly negative and it's completely wrong, because we don't punish our students when their behavior or misbehavior is a manifestation of their disability. It's against the law. So
yes, and like an answer like that too, like if the student already gets easily triggered and then you're coming out and wanting to just discipline them right away, that's gonna trigger them right, you know what I mean? So like it
yes,
just doesn't
absolutely.
make
Already know
sense.
they have an emotional disorder. Then you're not going to come at them with imposing more stringent. And this is to deter the onset. This is before they even start misbehaving. You're going to start punishing them. Like what?
Yes.
That's certainly not going to work. So reading these carefully, and they use sort of fancy language, imposing stringent consequences to deter the onset of undesirable classroom behaviors. Fancy language for punishing them before they start acting up. Um, Make sure that you're reading them closely, and that you're making sure that the keywords and phrases you identified in the scenario or in the question, that they are addressed in your answer, that your answer like drives with it. Like this one here, B, they didn't talk about schoolwork. It didn't drive at all. It had nothing to do with it. And this here, you also have to know that there's a lot having to do with culture, that there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, as
Mhm.
far as ability within the EL community, because it's just misunderstood. And it's I don't want to say easier, but I guess it is just easier to say, Mr. Herrera, Julio's already your student and he needs more social skills instruction. And you should. That would be the right answer for me. Like, in addition to that, like, just give him more. He might need more building of social vocabulary, of basic interpersonal communication skills. That might be the case, that he was only just immigrated a year ago. If I'm my ELAR brain, which is the only thing I have, is right, then he should be at an intermediate. Maybe he's emerging beginner intermediate. And so of course he's not going to be, you know, just shooting the breeze with the teacher. He's not there yet. So it is literally both her job and your job to increase instruction in social vocabulary, and that means not just like direct instruction of vocabulary, but having conversations. Hey, what's up, Julio? How was your weekend? What did you do this weekend? Just having random conversations. How did it go? Oh, did you have to do, did you have to do chores? Did your brothers and sisters help you? No, they don't help you. Just like really trying to pull out the language conversation. And that will help increase. That is a form of social skills instruction with them. And with someone who is already an English language learner, they need that. And that teacher should know that. The teacher is coming to you saying they need it. She should know. And if I were her supervisor, I would tell her that she needs to have more frequent, organic conversations with Julio on the fly, not about academic stuff. How are you feeling today, Julio? What'd you like about yesterday's story, or just whatever, I like that baseball cap you're wearing. Do you like baseball, or do you whatever? Trying to get them to utilize uncommon speech with you, to practice in organic speech communication, to be an agent of their own learning and speech in a new culture, which is not something that happens in 1 year for a sixth grader. That doesn't even happen in 1 year for an adult. They don't become acclimated to a whole new country. This is someone who was brought here, through no will of their own, with an established learning disability, new culture. So, I don't think that they're lacking social skills. I think maybe they need a little bit more practice in speaking in social, settings. Okay, here's a really good one. It's a good one because it's tricky. The question, pretty straightforward, but in your answer choices, you are given more than one reasonable suggestion, but many of them are wrong because of the words used inside of the answer. They seem like they're good, but if you are a careful reader, you will be able to see why they are not good answers. So let's carefully read the scenario and the question, and I'm going to have my handy dandy highlighter out, and I'd like for you to just tell me what you want for me to highlight as important that you need to make sure you take into consideration before you choose the answer choice. So we have 10 months ago, 16-year-old Andrew suffered a head injury in an automobile accident and was left legally blind. Since the accident, Andrew seldom leaves the house. A few friends occasionally come over to listen to music, but Andrew fears that they will get bored and stop visiting. Of the following, Andrew's special educator's best response, meaning they might have given you more than one okay responses, to the situation would be to do one of these things. Now, before we read these answer choices, what things should I highlight as important for us to pay attention to?
Maybe 10 months ago.
Yeah, so he just recently is what that means.
The suffered a head injury.
Yeah, he had a head injury.
Left legally blind.
Left legally blind. Okay. What else?
He seldom leaves the house.
Yep. Seldom leaves the house. What else?
Andrew fears that they will get bored and stop visiting.
So he has fears, right, of being alone because he's in his house all the time. And so we need the best response to this situation for Andrew, the 16-year-old, right? Who fears that he's going to be alone. He doesn't leave the house and he's legally blind. He's been legally blind for 10 months. So let's take a look at what the answer choices give us. Suggest a variety of new and interesting activities that can be done at home and that his friends are likely to enjoy. B, help Andrew develop proficiency with electronic media that will both entertain him and allow interactions with others from home. C, ask Andrew what social activities he would like to participate in outside the home and help him develop the skills for doing so. D, arrange for Andrew to begin socializing with peers who are blind or visually impaired. Now, let me know when you can eliminate one and why. Like when you can bet yourself $5, that's not the right answer.
Hold on.
Let me know your thought process. What are you thinking? Which one of those are looking
Yeah.
good? What's looking bad?
Um, I think B, because even if that stuff interests him, it may not interest others, or he may not be sure that it interests others. And so,
You said B? Right. So we
yeah.
don't even know, like, did he say he wanted to be proficient with electronic media?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Did he say that?
No.
And it allows him to do what further?
Oh, yeah, just stay at home.
He's still at home, so it cannot be the answer. The problem is he's at home. He never leaves. That's the situation.
True.
Not that his friend.
Yeah.
We don't want for him to just have a flow of visitors. We want for him to leave the house. Is the situation. So
Um,
we want for him to leave the house, find new friends in those excursions in his life because he's 16 and eventually will be an adult.
okay. So then you can also eliminate A.
Absolutely. You can also eliminate A because A does not remove him from the home. He's
Yeah.
again suggesting interesting activities that can be done at home and that his friends are likely to enjoy. That's not even a for sure. But even so, even if it was a for sure that they're likely to enjoy things that we suggest, their special ed teacher, it's still being done at home. And we need him to get out of the house. We don't want him to be seldomly leaving the house. And so now we are left with C and D. And of those, which is the best response?
C.
C is the best response. You know, D is something I might do. And in fact, something that one of my students, I had her in 7th grade, and that year she lost her left eye. And she still has very, very limited vision in her right eye. And she's my student again. She's actually my intern. She was my student this year, a first year teacher, amazing teacher, amazing. But in the summer after, I wasn't her special ed teacher, I was her English language arts teacher, but I do know that part of her like studying and help was they got the special ed department, but also her parents were very involved. She was sent to a school for the blind in one summer. So she got to be around people who were like, you know, partially blind, completely blind, legally blind, and begin to learn Braille, begin to, you know, interact. And that was something so valuable and important. Now, would you only arrange for them to just begin with that? No, you would want to ask what are they interested in. Remember, any answer choice that gives you the option of listening to the human being that is a student and taking their interests and their personhood and helping that be a strength and helping them build on that as a strength later, that's always going to be the right answer. You want to helping Andrew explore his own interests and develop certain skills based on his interests. He'll be able to participate in social activities with his peers and gain self-esteem. And in you showing him how to do this, like this process, like, oh, let's, you know, what are some things that interest you that you would like to do? Oh, you would like to, you know, learn to play the guitar. That's cool. You can. You know, blind people can learn to play the guitar. And so getting him stuff like that. Someone to work with and finding out who he can contact, and then that becomes a new skill, not just playing the guitar, but knowing like when I want to do something, I can Google like this here. I could go to like to the Facebook, or what do we do to find what I needed in order to find this new avenue, this new road for interaction. And then that itself becomes a life lesson for them to repeat myriad times, you know, hopefully later on in their life. Okay. Which of the following instructional strategies will most likely support the needs of a gifted elementary student who is eligible to receive special education services? So what is the question asking you in layman's terms? What's the goal here for the special ed teacher? If I were to put it in a sentence, I'd say the goal for the special ed teacher, excuse me, is the best instructional strategy to support the gifted elementary student, which would be the most. So A, focusing on talent development while providing supports for deficits. B, providing shortened assignments with specifically defined tasks. C, limiting external stimulation while presenting an advanced curriculum. D, assigning classroom assignments that can be completed independently. Now, what's important from your question scenario for you to pay attention to? What grade level are we talking about?
Elementary.
Right. And so are you going to be limiting external stimulation while presenting an advanced curriculum in elementary for gifted
No.
students? Probably not. Remember, we want to best support the needs. Which one is most supportive in language?
Would it be B?
You think B is most supportive? Focusing on talent development while providing supports for deficits. I feel like that's most supportive. B, providing shortened assignments with specifically defined tasks. That's actually an instructional strategy of someone who has a learning disability. You would give them shortened assignments and give them very specified tasks, defined tasks, so that they don't get confused. So B is actually, it is an instructional strategy, but not for a gifted student. It's actually for someone with a disability where you shorten the assignments.
Right. Yeah,
A is,
then,
yeah, A is the correct answer. So with our gifted and talented students, like I said, they do have deficits, and sometimes they have deficits that seem a little bit like, you know, very special ed limiting deficits, but they are gifted in other ways. And so finding ways to develop the talents they have while supporting any deficits they have is incredibly important with our gifted and talented students. All right, we are going to end here for today. But if you would like to meet again, please just let me know. And I will, once this uploads, once I upload it, I will send you a link. That way you can rewatch it. And you have the link to the study materials as well, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll also send you the links to the other videos as well, so you can watch those. Please like and subscribe the videos. And for sure subscribe to the channel because I'm trying to get my numbers up. I'm like so close to being paid to help people.
Okay. Okay, nice. Yeah. I'll help you out. And especially because, I mean, you were so nice and you took all this time to, spend with me. So definitely.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Teacher Builder pays for my services for you guys.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So can I just ask you a couple quick questions?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I think I kind of feel like if I were to be able to study with others, it would probably be better for me. So do you know anything like that? Do you know if there's like any groups or like
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely. I have I'll have I'll send you her information. I have a student she's studying for the special ed. And then I have a few, and I'm gonna have a session on Thursday. If you'd like to come in, there's gonna be multiple people at 6:30 on Thursday for special ed. And so I know that last time Samantha asked if people wanted to do a study group and get together.
Okay, awesome. And then I guess the other question I had, I don't know how helpful this would be since I've told you like I start studying and I stop. Do you know anywhere where there's like, I guess I can take like a free practice exam to see, like my competency level, where I'm at.
I'm not sure. There might be one. You know what? Let me find out. I'll ask the office. They're closed right now, but I'll ask them tomorrow because I think there might be one that you can pay to take that's like $50, I think. But I need to
Okay.
ask.
All right, man. That's it. Yeah, that's all the questions I had.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to working with you again, and we'll get it out of the way. We'll get you in the classroom and get it done.
Okay, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. You have a good day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.